Good afternoon and welcome. This is the 22nd of August 2020. Here I'm sitting at home in Scotland. And I'd like to tell you that I'm going to do a second video for the East West Bridge School. I'm the main instructor teacher for this school. We're just getting off the ground and we're just coming out of lockdown, so today I had my first lesson for 3 months. And so this video is meant to be contemporary for this time. I feel that we're in a crisis at the moment, a political, cultural, religious, societal crisis, and I think that those of you in the English-speaking world would agree that yes, this is the case. Possibly it's similar for some of the other European countries where their first language is not English, but I think their situation is not as dire as it is in the West at the moment. Here I'm talking about the inheritors of the Western European culture. And in order to address this crisis, I'd like to talk about the roots of chivalry and Christianity and how they came together in the very early Middle Ages, towards the end of the Roman Empire. Because by doing this, I will be able to bring points of focus and interest to a point where one is able to understand and counter arguments against race and ethnicity, which are completely wrong and designed to disempower you, basically. That's what they're designed to do. So whoever's doing that, they probably know it's designed to do that, and they're doing it purposely. To back up my main thesis here that we're in a crisis, I'm going to read an article published in the Wall Street Journal on the 17th of August. I can't read all the article because it's copyright, but it also hits the nail on the head of what's going on in the United States right now. The article is "The Dangerous Consequences of Putting Race First" by Gerard Baker, published August the 17th. In this unusual summer of love, our new rulers, those tolerant folk who now control the physically decaying streets of major cities alongside the intellectually decomposing common rooms and newsrooms of many universities and media companies, have instructed Americans to work on developing their race awareness. If you haven't yet checked your white privilege, identified the roots of your own oppression, or made valiant efforts to ensure that black and brown Americans are given proper lexicological distinction over white Americans, then you haven't been paying attention. For a diverse nation that has strived not always successfully to make reality of the ideal of all the people together, the risks of fragmentation from such an explicit call to ethnic self-consciousness are stark. To invite Americans to place such emphasis on race and the various grievances and privilege that flow from it is to sow division as effectively as any racist trope about immigrants or minorities. So racist trope being, of course, black people from Nigeria, or criminals, or Asians from Thailand are lazy. Those kind of generalities and cliches. So I think this is a really good article. And then he goes on to talk about Kamala Harris, who's the President Regent, and he warns us about what fires she's been playing with. I won't say any more on that. And also, to back up this article, I'm going to highlight a few points by John Gray. He's the Emeritus Professor at London School of Economics, and on July the 19th, 2020, he wrote an article for the Sunday Mail, and in it he says, as a headline, it's not an exaggeration to compare the methods used by the new woke movement to those of Mao's Red Guards. And then to pick out a couple of highlighted sentences, any dissenting voices have to be silenced, no subject is immune. Again, the citadels of capitalism have fallen. There is a witch hunt in America. And he goes on to talk about, again, what was said by Gerard Baker, that the universities are not providing leadership, that they've caught themselves in a trap of political correctness. And believe me, I've been fighting political correctness since the age of 30. So I know it's ideological and destructive base. Now, so that we might get a better understanding of where we all came from and the complexities of race and the history of the English-speaking world, it's tied to the history of the Roman world, going back to the migrations, even as far back as 800, 900 BC, before Christ. And there's a few things on this map I'd like to point out, which would help you to get a better understanding of where we came from, where our roots are. So I briefly use this pointer in Britain on the left side up here, Scandinavia at the top of the map, coming down to the Baltic here. We've got a Gothic warrior sitting here, standing here. Germany, France, Spain, Italy, North Africa, you can just see it at the bottom, Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. In the early history of Europe, there are a number of important geographical features that need to be understood before you can get the grasp of the movements of people. There are 4 south-facing peninsulas onto the Mediterranean Sea. There's Spain, then there's Italy, then there's Greece, and then the peninsula of Turkey, which is of course much bigger than others, pointing in a different direction. And then north of these, of course, you have the mountain ranges, you have the mountains of the Balkans, and Slovenia, Croatia, you've got the Alps chain, you've got the Pyrenees, and you have the Danube River flowing into the Black Sea, north of Turkey, Anatolia, and you've got the Rhine flowing northwards into the North Sea. Between the Alps and northern Germany and Poland and the Ukraine, there was a huge forest stretching many hundreds of miles, and this was referred to by the early geographers and historians. We go to 800 BC, there was a migration out of Gotland here in the north, a very important migration. So these are a pre-Viking people. They migrated south across the Baltic, perhaps because of population expansion or because the climate had turned colder, we don't know for sure. And they settled in the lower Vistula River between Poland and Russia. Then they migrated south and gradually created a large population here in southern Poland. These people were I guess, tall, fair-haired, blue-eyed people, your typical Scandinavians. But they intermingled with another people who are not white. They are from Iran. They are the Alans and the Scythians, and they were already in Eastern Europe at this time. The Alans they had horses, they had wagons and chariots. They were migratory. They spoke an Iranian dialect. They were related to the Scythians. They had a horse warrior culture. The Goths and the Scythians, Alans, they mixed together. I guess they found a way to do some simple trade. Perhaps they were also warring tribes capturing each other's women, which they did do in those days, of course, for breeding purposes. As I said, the Scythians, according to the ancient texts, were red-haired and tough, hardy. With the early Greek and Roman expansion and development of civilization, the Romans, of course, having conquered the Mediterranean, defeated the Carthaginians, come across to France with Julius Caesar, then across to Britain, creating a Pax Romana, an empire based on trade, peace, and public education. We consider it to be a higher civilization because of their material advances, their understanding of agriculture, their understanding of trade, their working of stone, all sorts of things, of course, that you will know. They established a border on the Rhine and on the Danube, and it's round about the year, between the years 300 to 400 to, 280 to about 400 AD, that the Romans come into contact with the Goths, and it's a very complex contact, because by this time some of the Goths had actually captured some Christians in a raid to Turkey, and these Christians, Ulfinus, I believe, was one of the first, converted many of the Germanic Goths to Christianity and introduced the idea of war as being only a necessity, and that one should follow Christ's teaching of the oneness of humanity, peace, establishing good relations with your neighbours, promoting civility, etc., etc. And the Goths were very much influenced by that. Now, at this point, within the Roman Empire, having located to Constantinople during the time of Constantine, there was a debate about the nature of Christ and Christ's nature to God and the Holy Spirit, and this led to schisms and arguments and, difficult political divisions, which kind of could not create a united front. It caused dissension and disturbance. And the first Goths were Arian Goths, who believed that God came first and Christ is begotten by God, and not the Trinitarian version where God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit are three equal powers, uncreated. The Goths argued differently and said Christ had come later. This led to a division and a kind of complexity, because bishops down in Africa, some of them supported the Trinitarian doctrine. Bishops in the West also, came under that influence. They supported the Trinitarian doctrine, and here the Goths and some people in Turkey and Greece supported the Arian doctrine from the Bishop Arius. That's what it's come to be called. With the disintegration of the Roman Empire and the invasion of the Huns from the borders of China, and the push of the Huns against the Goths, the Scythians, the Alans, the Vandals, and other Germanic tribes, including the Celts, there was a gradual breakup of the Roman Empire. The Romans also at this point, around about the 4th, 5th century AD, relied on Gothic and German and Celtic and Spanish soldiers, Turkish soldiers, to become part of their army, because they had a high attrition rate, and also they would recruit barbarian peoples who were skilled horsemen. The skilled horsemen could fight against the Huns, and the Goths and the Alans could use the bow, the Hunnish bow, as a counter weapon. And so they were keen to recruit the best soldiers from the fringes of the empire, and these soldiers were sometimes paid, sometimes not paid, and this led to mutinies, divisions, and what we call as the fall of the Western Roman Empire with the barbarian invasions. So you have the Goths coming down into Thrace, and then migrating down to Greece, raiding. Some of them, Christian ones, were not doing that so much. It was the ones who had not converted to Christianity. And then you had Theoderic the Great of the Ostrogoths, the Western Goths, migrating into Italy and creating a Romano-Gothic empire here. Theoderic, he's been sidelined in a lot of historical text. He was brought up as educated in Constantinople. He was fluent in Gothic and Latin, and could also speak Greek. And he created a quite underrated and I think an amazing Gothic empire. He rebuilt some of the cities in northern Italy that had been wasted by wars. He brought a vitality to perhaps a decaying or effete Roman Empire, depends on which side you want to take there. And he's one of the first really chivalric kings to appear on the scene, in the sense that he tried to make peace with his enemies. Maybe he was not always consistent, but he tried his best for his people, and that's why he has this this appellation, Theoderic the Great, because for 30 years he helped to re-establish the greatness of the Roman Empire, and he promulgated the Christian teachings, and that provided the basis also for Christianity in Spain, which I featured in an earlier lecture, because for some time Theoderic's Goths, the Ostrogoths, were in contact with their cousins, the Visigoths, in Spain, and Theoderic was regent over them for a long period of time, and they helped to promote the idea of tolerance of other people's religion, as I say, encouraging trade, encouraging peace, getting rid of banditry, and so on and so forth. These were the Christian ideals, and of course trying to stop the slave trade, which was one of the features of the Roman Empire, as I'm sure many of you listening to this will know, that during the 1st, 2nd century BC, 3rd century BC, right through to the time of the Christian conversion, slavery was a very big part of the Roman tradition, and they got slaves from all over the world, from Africa, from Persia, from the Arab countries, especially from the Slavs are not on the scene at this time, but especially from Eastern Europe, etc. And there was a constant slave trade going on. Now, if I now come to this idea of, white privilege and the white race, there is no such thing. It's a complete and utter fiction, and we are stupid if we were to believe that there is a white race. Just before the Second World War and after the Second World War, the Nazi philosophy were the ones who promulgated this idea of white supremacy, and they took some ideas from Aryan philosophy, which is again totally mixed up and confused, and they made it in a propagandistic way to elevate themselves as being superior to the Slavic peoples and the French and the British, etc. Unfortunately, this philosophy made its way over to the United States, and during the time when the Americans were demonstrating the power of the atom bomb and the Bikini Atoll, John Pilger, the journalist, has pointed out that the Americans used this kind of, shall we call it, racist supremacist ideology to experiment their weapon and its effects on the people of the Marshall Islands, and this has come out quite recently and is quite disturbing. But these are aberrations. This is not the Christian culture of Europe and the inheritance that we gave to the United States. These are just things that have come out that are counter to what we were taught by the Christians and by our Christian ancestors. And I suggest that they're given too much attention these days, and they're twisted and warped to bring us to this situation where white privilege, Black Lives Matter. Again, there's no such thing as black people. They are again made up from 101 different indigenous races ranging in different skin colours, and it's a complete fiction. So I hope that we can revive the culture of chivalry, and we have to make ourselves worthy of it. So we have to educate ourselves a little bit better and be prepared to counter arguments being thrust on us. And I hope I want to cut this video in the next minute or two, and I'd like to sum up. I hope that you might be able to help sponsor me. I'd like this to be promoted in English-speaking world and in other cultures as well. But I have at the moment no resources to do this. I have not been sponsored. I'd like to set up a school of chivalry if possible, and teach people the history and the customs of chivalry. I'd like to institute a chivalric order, and that's proving difficult because our attention seems to be dragged elsewhere. So my name is Gordon Bryce. I have a small school of martial arts called the East West Bridge School, and you can contact me through my Facebook page if you wish to ask questions, and later on I'll give more details on my third video about possible sponsorship and how money could be raised. In the meantime, please contact me if you have ideas on how we could help to reconstruct and bring back the old values to the English-speaking world. Then that would be great. I would also like to promote the Baha'i faith. I do believe that it will, if it's successful and adapts to European culture and the cultures of the West, it will help us to bring civilization forward into a new phase, a new world. But first I think we have to see the complete and utter disintegration before we're able to build something new. But let's look at the green sheets coming through now. So thank you for your patience. Please contact me if you have any ideas or how you could help promote my ideas. Have a good week. Thank you.